Today, I'm going to be showing you how to create a Flask application in about 10 lines of code. So the first thing that we need is, let's try to see if we have yes, we do have that. And do we have Python? Yeah, we do. Let's go back to projects and web. Since we're going to have different web projects from different frameworks, so we're going to have Rails projects here. We're going to have Flask projects here, and we're going to have Django projects here, and we're also going to have Express projects here. So yeah, so we need to have. Actually, we can make a Python folder that has only the Django and Flask projects. Since Django and Flask are written in Python, so it makes sense to have all those projects in one huge Python folder. Alright, so inside this Python folder is where we're going to have the virtual environment. So let's go ahead and make the virtual environment inside this folder, inside the Python folder. So to do that, we'll just have to add the Python folder onto the workspace. So now we have the Python folder into the workspace. Since we're going to just be working with Flask today, open up a terminal and VM. It really doesn't matter what you call the virtual environment. So the virtual environment has been created. Okay, and you can see the folder is right there. So now all we have to do is activate the virtual environment. Okay, so to do that, just type, I don't know if you guys can see, I don't think you guys can see that, so I'll just push this up a little bit. Alright, so to activate the virtual environment, we have to type, clear this window, source, VM, is the name of the virtual environment, and inside the bin folder there's going to be an activation script. So that's this is what is going to activate the virtual environment. Okay, so go ahead and press enter. So now we can actually go ahead and start making our Flask application. So all I have to do is just type move Flask to Beaver. Alright, so now it's just been renamed. So we can just go ahead and go into that folder, and now we can start making our Flask application. Basic Flask application. We really need one file, and that's the app. Let's see, app just touch that. So inside Beaver, we just made this script, this Python script. But what's left is to just write the code from Flask. So we need to import the Flask object from the Flask module. And the way you do that in Python is you say from the module import this object. So we're going to be importing the Flask object from the Flask module. Okay, so there's a problem because right away I don't think we've installed Flask, the Flask module. So let's go ahead and install the Flask module. To do that, just type pip install Flask. So this is going to be installed in the virtual environment that we are using to develop this Flask application. Alright, so now Flask is installed, so we can go ahead and use it. app. Okay, so now we have to name the Flask, rename the Flask object. I'll give it a name. I'm gonna name it Beaver. So Beaver, since that's the name of the application. So Beaver is gonna be equal to the Flask object. This name refers to the name of it refers to the name of the module. In this case, Flask. Alright, so the next thing is going to be to, let's display, let's say, so if we go to the index of this application, let's display this string, welcome to Beaver. Beaver's Flask app. Okay, so, but to do that, we also have, so basically what we have to do is register this function. So we're going to register this function to some URL, and that URL is going to be just that. So this is called a decorator in Python. This @beaver.route decorates the index function, and a decorator is essentially a method that's able to alter a function, in this case index, without having to change the source code of the function itself. So if you already knew what a decorator was, you don't have to look at this example. So, for example, let me show you an example. So let's open up a shell here, a Python shell. Now let's create a function. It's called D. And this function is going to take in a function. So it's going to decorate some function called func. All it does really is just going to say it's going to print something, something like function has been decorated. Okay, so it's going to print that out, and it's going to return the function. So now let's decorate. Let's create another function, but we're going to decorate it with D. Okay, so remember D is a function that we just created, and we're going to use that to decorate another function. And this other function is going to be, let's call it A. And A is going to also print out something. In this case, just my name is, actually just my function, I am function A. Okay, so that's that. So right after we declare A, you can see that D gets executed right immediately after so basically it's just decorated A. And to actually show that concretely, all we have to do is just call D, and then pass A onto D. So when we press enter, we should actually see two statements. We should see the statement from A, or the return basically A being executed, what happens when A is executed, and after that the decorations from D. Okay, so, and that's what happens. That's basically what a decorator does. So let's close this shell. Let's go back to our application. The next thing we have to do is run this application. And to do that, all we have to do is just beaver run, and that's it. That's really all we have to do. If you wanted to, you can specify other things like the address or the port, say 3000, can also specify if you want to enable debugging, but right now this is fine. This will work. There are problems. So there's a bunch of windows at the bottom of this of the editor in Visual Code Studio, and the first one is the terminal. This is where you can run your Python scripts and evaluate Python expressions, and also do some just execute Linux commands. The second one is the problem window. It's going to show you any syntax problems with your code, with your Python code. Third one is output. This is where the output is going to be when you execute your script, or when you debug your script. There's also a debugging console that allows you to examine variables as you're debugging your application. So right now in the problems window, there's a pilot is telling us there's an unexpected enter file. We don't have a Berver object. The name of the object is Beaver, Berver. So that was an error on my part. All right. So I think that should fix it. But just to be sure, we have to make sure that the script that we are running is actually executable. We actually do have permissions to execute that script in Python. So let's go ahead and run this one more time. So now it's running. We should be able to see. If we navigate to this address, we should be able to see this string. So let's actually type in the exact address presented to us, and indeed we see the string "Welcome to Beaver's Flask application." So that's just the basics. Just to get something running. So other things that you could do, you could specify. Let's actually close this. You could specify. You could say that we want this to run at the local host, and we want it to run at port 3000. So let's run that. So now it's running localhost port 3000. So if we actually type in localhost 3000, you see the same thing. So also this warning is telling us that this is a development server. It is a development server by default, but to explicitly tell Flask that it is a development server, we have to export the Flask environment as development. So now when we run this script again, we should then see the error again. It says we've already specified that it's an development environment, and debugging mode is on by default, but we can disable that in this run method by stating that by setting the debug flag to false. So when we run this again, it's going to say debug mode is off. So that's it for the basics. In the next video, I'm going to show you how we can actually add HTML files to this. How we can actually return a rendered HTML file, and how we can add more stuff to the application, like the style sheets and JavaScript and all that. But right now, the basics. That's it for the basics.